So you never have any paranormal experiences or anything that was psychic?
I just don't. I'm the kind of person that I don't believe that exists.
There's that music again. You know what that means. Another Charbroiled Chat is about to begin, and surprise! Grace isn't buying any of that paranormal stuff. Or is she? Let's find out.
Well, you know what's funny about those words for me? I totally grab onto them, and there's so many things that go through my mind, but I don't believe in any of them. They really?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, pretty much. What are the words again? You said supernatural.
Paranormal, supernatural, extraterrestrial, mysticism, astrology, magic, fantasy.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, but
non-reality or non-perceived.
Yeah.
Well, non-common sense reality. That's what you're talking about.
Right.
Well, what I was going to say, when I hear those words, the only thing I think of is in art, right? I always think of what are the shows that I like that have to do with that? What are the books that I like? What are, what's the music that tends towards that way? I never think of those as anything
paranormal
in my life that is real at all.
So you never have any paranormal experiences or anything that was psychic?
I just don't. I'm the kind of person that I don't believe that exists. I just, I have had some things that were, I've only had one thing actually.
It's interesting.
In my life that I thought was weird. The other things were more coincidental to me, but maybe they weren't. Maybe I should classify them as paranormal. I don't know. For example, my godmother, my aunt, our families were very close. This was my dad's sister. Our families were super close, and she died when she was pretty young, like 45. She left 5 kids, under the age of like 20. Super sad, super sad. And one night I was talking to my sister, and I said, wow, I had a dream about Aunt Marge last night. And she said, so did I. So some people would take that as maybe paranormal or psychic or something, right? I just think that's a crazy coincidence.
Yes, synchronicity. Yeah, it's synchronicity.
But it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And it's a question, what is that? What does that amount to? What is the significance of synchronicity? Mm-hmm.
Yes. What is the significance of it? Is it some force beyond us that's making that happen? Or is it just pure random number generator, right? There's, every so often something funky is going to happen and it's just the law of averages.
You're just two people in the same stream.
Yes.
So it's likely that it now and then you're going to cross streams or whatever, however you want to put it.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
What about the X-Files?
Well, that's the first thing I thought of when you said all of those words, because I'm such a nerd. I still love the X-Files. So
you like the X-Files, but not because of any connection to your...
Oh, yeah. No, I didn't believe any of it.
Yeah.
However, with extraterrestrial stuff, I think that it's as likely as not that just the universe is so huge. How could we possibly... And we know so little, really. So much is just theory. And I don't say that as an anti-science person or anything. I just say it as there's so much we don't know. So
that's
there are extraterrestrials.
Okay, but that's sort of where I stand on all of those things, which is that the limits of our knowledge are so extreme that all these things that we refer to, with those terms are just what we don't understand.
Yeah, and I think you and I have talked about that before, Dave.
Yeah.
Our brains evolved to a point to deal with what we have to deal with, but that's as far as it goes. There's no reason, there's not even a reason why we should know about any of these things.
Right.
We deal with Newtonian physics. And, the rock falls off the cliff, get out of the way, and yet we make up all this stuff. Stories and mythologies. And so why? Because we can't explain anything?
Plus science is at a point where even the scientists don't understand what they're doing. I mean, at least...
It's true.
Well, the quantum mechanics, that's what the quantum physicists always said. If you understand it, you don't understand it. And so, it's already at the point where 100 years ago, science was saying, well, this is the reality, and I don't even know what it is we're saying.
And all the studies on consciousness,
right,
too.
Right.
Very similar, that it's just so, in some ways, so unknowable, or at least they just don't, there's no unifying theory of consciousness.
Right, and how does consciousness how can you stand back? How can consciousness stand back from itself and observe itself? It's impossible. It's like there's a limit to how much you can understand, because the act of understanding has all of these underlying principles or rules that are just assumed or taken for granted or operating in the act of understanding itself that you can't get out of. You can't, step out of it.
I remember you talking about that, Dave, and I think something you said, and I don't know if it was your idea or one of your philosophers, but it was that idea that you cannot comprehend what you don't know.
Yeah.
What's unknowable, you can't comprehend that.
Right.
One of your philosophers. Dave.
Yeah, one of my philosophers, yeah. One of my good buddies.
Is this Wittgenstein by any chance?
Exactly.
Wittgenstein, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, my good buddy Wittgenstein.
When I saw that on the list, I knew immediately. I had to ask the question, who put Wittgenstein on the list? But I knew immediately. But actually, that whole statement, I went through a period. I don't even remember. Well, I do remember when it was. I think Luis was pretty young at the time, 3 or 4. And there's 2 things. Everything I say has an A and a B part. First of all, I was having a lot of thinking about death, which everyone says I'm obsessed with death anyway, but I was just really thinking about it a lot in a bad way, right? Just the whole unknowableness and blah, 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 blah. So every year I try to buy myself a little Christmas present, because I usually know that I'm not going to get anything I really want. So I always buy something for myself.
You buy yourself a fear of death Christmas present?
Not to laugh at that, because that year, one of my favorite authors, Julian Barnes, put a book out about death and the fear of death. And that was my Christmas present to myself. And I was like, this is sick. Merry Christmas, Grace.
Wow.
So
that's really meta.
Well, so that was my Christmas gift. But also, Dave, and it didn't really help very much. I thought he was going to come to some really good conclusion for me, but it didn't really. It was very good because it's Julian Barnes. But Dave, I remember you saying the whole idea that you can't comprehend what you don't know. I don't know if I'm paraphrasing that correctly or not.
Yeah, sort of.
That made me feel a lot better, because I was like, I have no idea, nor can I comprehend what the possibilities really are.
I think it was Yogi Berra said that, not Wittgenstein.
Might have been.
You don't know what you don't know, yeah.
Well, I was thinking Rumsfeld, right? He's really the leading light of my mysticism, I suppose. You don't know what you don't know.
Rumsfeld. He said that. I don't even remember that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of disappointing, because I thought, because we're all being so reasonable and everything, I thought, sure, there'd be, oh yeah, I see a ghost every morning.
Well, I've had a couple of times when I felt like that. Once I was in my bedroom when I was a teenager, and I woke up and I thought for sure there was someone standing next to me, and I thought it was my grandfather. And it was really weird. I just laid there for a while, and then I got up and I turned on the light. That was the weirdest feeling ever.
Okay, so there's another one, Grace.
Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I discount these things because they scare me. And I don't want to be scared.
Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't, movies like with the occult and with ghosts really scare me.
Right. Our neighbor across the street, I was talking to her. She doesn't want to believe in any of it, but demons scare her, even though she doesn't believe in them. But just in case there are, she's terrified. Just the word demons and all that.
That's funny.
That's exactly. I mean, I have never been able to watch The Exorcist, so film person that I am, supposedly the best horror movie ever made, and I do like horror movies a lot. I cannot. I've heard descriptions of it. My brother told me a couple of things when he went to see the version where they restored some of the minutes, and just the things that he told me verbally have kept me up nights.
Right.
Terrified.
Yeah, I couldn't watch it in college. I watched it later. I just avoided it in college, but
Really?
But then I watched it later on, and I don't think it's that scary. It's creepy.
It scares the crap out of me.
It's creepy. It's not scary.
How come nobody ever sees a ghost at the beach?
Yeah, it's funny. I think one of the scariest movies ever made was The Haunting, the original Haunting.
Yeah, that was good.
And you don't see anything.
Yeah.
And it's all just suggestion. It's just the possibility that you don't know what that is outside the door, and it's pounding on your door. It's just like terrifying.
Yeah, and doesn't she say, "I wasn't holding your hand"?
Right. Yeah. Right.
I mean, one of the scariest things ever.
Yeah. It's great.
Do you watch horror or do you watch?
I watch certain horror.
But you don't have a predilection for?
No, I mean
sci-fi or what about Star Trek?
Oh no, I love all that stuff. I love sci-fi and all that stuff. I love it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so sci-fi is different from what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah, because sci-fi to me, someone described once, they said, because I don't really like Star Wars very much, and I read somewhere, I think a critic said it, that Star Wars is fantasy and Star Trek is science fiction. That's how this person put it, and that really resonated with me, because when I see Star Trek, I'm like, yeah, any of this could be true.
Yeah, right.
Right. It could happen. Where Star Wars has more of that fantasy sort of mystical element to it.
Yeah, it's got
that I don't
the force.
buy into.
Yeah, telekinesis.
Yes.
There's that thing about sci-fi, soft sci-fi and hard sci-fi.
Yeah, what's the soft one?
The soft one is where, possibly, maybe, but there's not really good science behind it.
Oh, behind it.
Hard sci-fi has, you could imagine 1,000 years from now, maybe they would have figured that out.
Yeah.
I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
I just think I think all this language that we're using when we describe all of these things is just, you're just describing things that we don't understand yet. If you can, I mean, even if it's understandable at all, like, quantum mechanics, maybe it's never understandable. Maybe you can never really understand it, but it still works. So, maybe it's perfectly acceptable to me that the large part of life is not understandable, but it works and it's there, and we're just using these terms like supernatural or paranormal or whatever to describe things that we can't make sense of. That's all.
Right. It's all the same thing, maybe.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what brings me back to the connection with art, right? I read this great book on David Lynch that talked about two things that are driving his movies after like the ones that start with, I think, Lost Highway, because the ones where there's doubling in each of them, they talked about one of the things that's really driving him is quantum physics and the ability for an atom to be in two places at once.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that is part of it. I used to think it was the whole Victorian thing with him, like in Victorian novels, the heroine would swoon or something and then wake up, and there'd be like sort of a totally different reality for that person. But it's much more modern than that. It's quantum physics.
Yeah.
Which is super interesting.
I went to see Tenet the other day.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. What did you think? I know Sub Beacon didn't. They had real problems with it.
Yeah. As I was going in the theater, I ran into myself coming out of the theater, and I shook my head at myself, so I didn't even go in. But
right.
I don't know if that was future me or past me.
But when you ran into yourself, then you realized you'd already seen the movie, so there's no point in going in.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I didn't.
I love plots like that. I do. I love plots like that. There have been a couple of really indie ones lately. One was, I think, Coherence, and there was another one that really played into those themes.
Yeah, that was kind
of
a small budget. Yeah, that was good.
The whole paranormal thing and psychic abilities and all of that. I mean, that is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Because there are people who totally buy into it. I just don't think I'm one of them necessarily. Wally, you didn't think I was someone who believed in that stuff, did you? Or did you?
No, all I knew was your connection to X-Files and Star Trek over Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe there's a lot more there.
Well, since you include mysticism, this overlaps with religion. Have you never taken Louise to church or anything?
Actually, I did. I've been a lapsed Catholic a bazillion times, right? But when he came home, I decided, well, he's from Guatemala. That's an ultra-Catholic country.
Yeah.
And, I'm Catholic. But I said, that's an ultra-Catholic country. And so I'm going to give that to him. It was a great community, And I stayed there for 14 years. And it's interesting, though, because I always felt kind of like a fraud because I thought, what if he asks me, Mom, do you believe in God? Because I don't know what I believe.
Yeah.
Did you keep taking him?
Well, we went for 14 years, and then we started going to another place, and then COVID hit. So we haven't done anything since then. And I've been thinking about whether I want to return or not. Religion is not... I made a lot of friends in this community, and their faith is a big part of their lives.
Yeah.
And I'm not like that at all. I never pray. Except it's like, please, God, let me do, I don't pray.
Let me win the lottery.
Right. I know. I never prayed with Luis, really. When he had to take a little test before he could move on to getting first communion, and he blew it, because I hadn't done anything with him at home. And that's not supposed to be what it's like. You're supposed to live your faith at home, and I don't. Because I don't have it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the community is a different thing from the spirituality.
It really is, and I know that there were a lot of people there who stayed there because of the community.
Right. I'm the same way. I often think I must be the least spiritual person I know because I never give any thought to it at all.
Yeah.
I wonder about death and that sort of thing, but I don't feel like I need to know any of the other stuff.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't see it as about knowledge at all. Like when you say,
It's not supposed to be, right?
Yeah, I don't know what I believe. Well, yeah, it isn't about knowledge.
I guess what I mean is I don't feel like I need that backing me up or whatever it is. I don't need to believe anything. It never occurs to me to have to believe anything.
I really always wished I could. I had a grandmother who really should have been a nun, and she was so devout, and it was such a grounding for her. And I remember the priest said something like faith is hope, which I always thought was really interesting. So is the idea, I hope I'm going to be born again. But how can you keep hoping for that in the absence of anything? I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. See, I think of it as, again, sort of the opposite of all that. Like when somebody... I think the understanding of hope is that it's an openness of mind, that there is this incredible possibility. Yeah. It all goes back to the same thing. Like, I don't even understand what the universe is. I don't understand what life is. I don't know what any of this is. And hope is being completely open to that ignorance and the fact that there is so much more there than I understand, that it's very likely that there is something much greater. And I don't even, and I'm so cut off from it that I don't even understand it, and I can't understand it.
I think hope makes sense like that.
Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
But also the opposite is true, that some people grasp onto it just as a solution.
That's right. That's the problem, is that it becomes like a substitute for science. It becomes a way of trying to manipulate the world or change the future or use this something, and that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's solved. I don't have to think about it.
Right. It's solved, and if I am good, then this is going to happen, or if I pray, then this is going to happen, and that's not how it works. That isn't what life is.
Well, you don't know that, Dave.
Well, I don't know that exactly. Maybe it does. Maybe sometimes it does. Who knows?
I'm praying right now
that this podcast will end pretty soon, right?
Well, I guess the idea that maybe I'm more agnostic than anything.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah,
it sounds like you're an agnostic.
I think we don't know. I just wish we did know them, because I think they would be super cool. And maybe that's why I like sci-fi and all of that stuff so much, because wouldn't this be cool if this were true? And it could be. And if you go back and read some really old stuff, that there'd be a lot of things that people had predicted in their writing that have come true. I'd have to go back to whatever, Asimov or...
The reason I thought of this was, YouTube puts up the latest trailers. Every week they put up a batch of trailers. So I was watching the latest one, and the movies were a zombie movie, a psychological thriller that turned horrific, a superhero, a relationship movie that turned horrific, a superhero, a comedy that was trying too hard. In other words, no movies that I was interested in at all.
Yeah.
But it made me think the culture is really into this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt. I mean, it seems like horror and superhero movies are they're like the dominant genres.
Yeah, the superhero thing is very bizarre. It's like a substitute for the Greek gods or something. Like we have no mythology. We have no accepted mythology in the culture. And we've created this kind of cheap two-dimensional mythology where,
that's an interesting,
you have these superpowers. Yeah, you have these superpowers.
An interesting way to think about it.
And they're all in the framework of, again, practical, world-changing powers that you can use and put at your disposal. And that's never been what mythology is about. It's always about the reality that you can't control. The gods are toying with us. It's not that we're not using the gods to accomplish something. They're using us to have fun.
There is some of that out there. I mean, I don't know if you read American Gods, the Neil Gaiman book, and they made a series out of it, which I didn't see. I wanted to because it had so many good actors in it. But that, the gods, there were like old gods and new gods, and some of the new gods were like media, but sort of made flesh as gods. Made flesh as gods. I don't know if that's the right. Anyway, and then The Boys, that was on. Yeah. So that was really interesting because that was superhero, but all these superheroes are like totally damaged.
Assholes. They're dicks. Yeah, they're all dicks.
Yeah. So you knew that was going to come.
Well, that's been on the way. I mean, The Incredibles. A lot of these stories involve like how superheroes are shunned, and like the X-Men. Isn't that they're all mutants and people are kind of shunning mutants, and they're.
I've only seen one of those movies, so I can't say with authority that, but I'm sure you're right.
Yeah, no, it's a theme now in the superhero movies where they're all kind of like resented.
I was thinking of the mythology thing too, exactly the same thing, because right after I watched the YouTube trailers, it took me to, you want to look this up, there's a DC Comics, it's like a minute and a half, where they use Leonard Cohen singing Hallelujah against clips of earlier DC comic movies. And immediately, you think, wait a minute, this is the new religion.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
That's the new mythology. What was in between? Because in the 19th century, there were all the allusions to classical mythology. And now we have all the allusions to comic book mythology. Was there any point in between, like 20s through the 50s, where one dropped off and the other came in, or there was something else in there?
I don't know. The military?
Well, let me ask another question. I don't think there's probably an answer to that.
I don't know.
What does Luis think about? What is he like?
In what terms? In terms of
movies, video games?
Yeah, I mean, he's totally into all of the Marvel stuff. But then he's got very interesting taste, and probably because I raised him on this stuff, right? I would say he loves all the superheroes. He loves the sci-fi and X-Files and Star Trek and all of that, Star Wars. And then he loves the mobsters. Those are his three loves. He loves the mobster movies, which crack me up.
You mean Godzilla and...
No, mobsters, like he's...
Oh, mobsters.
Mobsters, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, right.
Yeah, mobsters. He's, like how we call him Don Fauci.
Dom Fauci.
Like he has seen, so, The Godfather 20 times, Casino, Goodfellas, Donnie Brasco, all of them.
Maybe that was the mythology between classical mythology and superhero mythology.
The mob?
Maybe. The mob.
It was the mob.
Criminal.
The 30s, 40s, 50s.
Well... I mean, there were those criminals that had the, Bonnie and Clyde and Al Capone, all of them. They were, for the 30s and 40s, they were big, and the movies were around them too, like the Jimmy Cagney movies and Humphrey Bogart. They were,
right.
That's an interesting idea.
Right.
That maybe they were the superheroes of the time in some way.
Every young guy in the 30s wanted to be a mobster or a cop.
And you're kind of outside of society, you're above it.
Or priest.
And you have power, and the rules don't apply, it's like a god.
So it all ties together.
Well, Wally, do you believe in ghosts and psychic ability and all that stuff?
No, it never even occurs to me.
It doesn't.
Yeah. No, I'm open to the possibility. Certainly.
You're always interested in synchronicity, though. At least at times, you've always noticed bizarre coincidences.
It just, when I think ghost, I think, no, probably not. But I'm open to the, who knows? That's the whole thing. Who knows?
Yeah.
Dave and I have talked about this
for years.
What bothers me in movies is I find reality much more interesting than fantasy.
Yeah. So do I.
Like I'm always saying, the joke is orcs.
Yeah. Right.
Why do we need orcs?
Yeah.
There's plenty of interesting things that happened in world history. We didn't need to invent orcs. I get the imagination part,
right?
World building, and I can't connect with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I would say over the past 15 years, at least, almost all I read is nonfiction because general fiction just does not interest me anymore. It's like, how many times can you read about someone's bad childhood and a bad divorce and a horrible family? Like, I can't read about that anymore, right? But
I have the cure, but go on.
But
I have the solution to that problem.
What's that?
Oh, no, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Oh, well, but the things that I have been reading when I pick up fiction, I went through all of the Game of Thrones books, like one after another, and it took me X number of months. But fantasy and horror fiction, for some reason, I can go for that right now, which is really weird because I used to be such a snob about that. Coming out of grad school, it's like, I don't read that crap. And that's fiction-wise, that's almost all I read.
Interesting.
Because I don't know, this is the regular, quote-unquote, literary fiction, I guess, right? Just doesn't get me anymore. I just read Nothing to See Here, which got such great reviews, glowing reviews, right? And I read it and I was like, well, that was pleasant, but didn't move me at all.
Whose book was that? Who wrote that?
Oh, God, I can't remember his name. It was a male writer.
What was it?
It was an interesting premise, and he did a good job with it and everything, but just didn't move me.
But my solution is go back 100 years.
Yes.
And try reading the fiction. And it's a completely different level of quality.
So like what you were talking about with your mom with Proust and everything?
Yeah, Proust. Yeah, go to read Proust. That'd be the first thing. And now I'm reading Jude the Obscure, which I hated. I hated it in grad school.
Yeah.
And, I don't even remember that much of it, but
I don't either.
It's excellent. I mean, it's excellent. And and it's, I don't know, you got to get to a certain age or something, but.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's Henry James, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy.
Henry James, yep.
Yeah, Anna Karenina. Anna Karenina is just, it's just transcendent. I mean, it's an amazing book. You can't get anything like that out of a movie or contemporary fiction. It's just completely different.
I should, I really don't have a background in any of the Russian.
Yeah, read it. Yeah, read that one book if nothing else.
Except for Nabokov. But.
Yeah, Chekhov. Chekhov is another one. Yeah, but
Chekhov. Actually, I lied. Yeah, I've read a lot of Chekhov.
But I agree with that.
But I should go back.
I agree with Walt that I prefer when it's like I was telling him to watch The Bureau on Sundance. This 5-season series about the equivalent of the CIA in France, and it's about French intelligence, and it's so amazing. It's just an amazingly good, realistic depiction of what they're doing and what's going on.
It's a documentary, though, or not?
No. It's fiction. It's fiction, but you just know it's like The Wire.
Yeah.
Like somebody went in and they just took all these stories, they got all this information, and they put it into a fictional framework. Yeah. Amazing. And they're talking about real people, al-Baghdadi, and, the stuff they're doing in the Middle East and Iran, France. It's like, it gives me this incredible respect for France.
Really?
And I've just never respected France except in the arts,
Wow.
I've never respected
It's amazing. Never. The frogs. Yes. Jeez. It's really something, but it's so good because it's just, you're convinced that this is This is absolutely what would happen and what could happen inside a bureau like that. You know, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of movies like on the more realistic side where I'm like, oh yeah, you know that this is what really happened. I mean, the mob movies, honestly. Right. You know, the Donnie Brasco movie. When Donnie Brasco. I read. I agree. I read his. I just finished it actually. The guy. Donnie, Joan Pistone. He had a follow-up book, and I just read the follow-up book, and I'm like, the movie seemed really accurate based on his book. You know? Great
movie.
We should do another episode on my links to the mob, by the way. So.
Oh, very good. Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Be careful, though, Grace. If you start reading Proust, you'll be afraid you might die before you reach the end of it.
Right. Yeah.
I'm telling you, there are some. And you know another thing too, and I don't know if it has to do with having a child or not, but I used to love really depressing movies and true crime books and it's very hard for me to watch and read that stuff now. It's just too much for me. The emotional part of it, you know. And I think it's having a child because there's so many ways that you can put yourself and your child into those stories afterwards, you know. And
you know, there's something about when you said Game of Thrones, it does make sense in that kind of history we can't get to. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We're kind of, you might say, well, why don't you read real history about medieval kings? But there's not that much there. It has to be made up. Mm-hmm. So that fills the gap. There's no history.
Yeah, there's no recorded. It's not on video.
The problem with history is that all of the really interesting detail usually is missing. I mean, you don't have the daily life. You don't have what the peasants were doing, you know, in 1450 or whatever it is. And so you know.
So you're making stuff up anyway.
Yeah, they're making it up because they're just using. Yeah, right. They're saying this is likely what was going on or what could have been going on.
There is a lot of interesting stuff in that regard, and in some ways this relates to what we're talking about in maybe a very tangential way. But someone I worked with at my last job gave me a couple of books on the plague. And they were so interesting. Oh my God. Yeah. Just page turners. And, you know, there was no one was there now. You know what I'm saying. But,
what was social distancing like? I mean, during the plague, was there social distancing or no?
No, I'm not going to remember, but it was, and it's interesting too, because now working in the School of Public Health, I've read some things too, like about the start of epidemiology and really the 1850s in London when they had a big cholera outbreak. That was the first time that they really connected what was really going on with illness, right? Before that, they thought it was like the miasma.
Yeah, right.
It was just bad air and all of that. And I don't think they necessarily connected it with the person next to them necessarily. Right. Not in the way that epidemiologists do.
Like microorganisms. They didn't think of microorganisms before that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Social distancing during the Black Death was like, don't lick my pustule.
Right. Right. Or you run screaming from another person. That's basically social distancing.
Right.
Yeah.
The thing with the reality, I was thinking that I can buy King Kong, but I can't watch Godzilla. There's just the basic possibility scientifically that there might be a giant monkey. Yeah. But I can't go with the giant two-legged lizard.
Really? Why?
And Rodan. Rodan is just completely beyond belief.
Because there's that reality connection. Like Alien. I like Alien because I can just slightly imagine that could be possible.
A big bug, yeah.
I have to have that little hook of reality to make my interest to it.
Even with the Jurassic Park movies and, you know, we can bring back some dinosaurs with DNA, that still wouldn't get you to Godzilla.
Exactly. Yeah, because there wasn't any Godzilla. There were dinosaurs.
But isn't Godzilla just a giant dinosaur somehow?
Oh, I don't think so.
Kind of.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, Rodan was. I think Rodan was a giant dinosaur, yeah.
Yeah, you sounded insulted just then, Walt.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was, he sounded snobby. Yeah. He didn't sound insulted. So. He sounded like a snob. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, well, that's what made Aliens so great, is that it was a war movie, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you had this crazy premise, and then they just turned it into a war movie.
Right. On the other hand, I watched all of Stranger Things.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. Wow.
I think the difference there, even though I didn't buy any of the goofy stuff, was that there were stakes,
Yeah.
You had these little kids connected to it.
Right.
And the monsters coming out of the ground or whatever it was, and the
Yeah.
psychic phenomenon. It was so well done that I went along with that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought you would do that. I wouldn't thought you would watch that. I would think.
I didn't expect to, but like 2 years later, something I started watching it, and I liked it.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Interesting. Yeah, it was good.
I watched a movie last night, #Alive, Korean, that's about a zombie attack. It's very much like World War Z or 28, was it 28 Days? No, what was it, 28 Days Later?
Yeah. 28 Days Later, yeah.
Very much like that. But we had big stakes because there was just one guy that was isolated in his apartment while this zombie virus basically is going around, and you can totally buy that because of what's happening right now. It's like, well, who's to say that the next crazy pandemic is not going to be a virus that turns us into cannibals?
Right.
Sure.
And Dave's like, sure, I could buy that. Uh-huh.
Yeah, why not? Save on my food bill.
True. And what about the whole mysticism word? That's another aspect of.
There was no connection.
Yeah, you threw that in. Yeah, that's a whole different category. I mean,
magic is a big part of all these movies, and you can quote me on this. If anything can happen, nothing happens.
Well, yeah,
that's the way I feel about all of them.
Yeah, that's the problem with like in Dark. If anybody I kept trying to get you guys to watch Dark, but by the end, I just thought this is just ridiculous. I mean,
I watched a few episodes, and it just didn't grab me because I felt like I was going to figure out what was going on.
No, believe me, you weren't going to figure it out. I mean, it was just so, it just got weirder and weirder. And there've been a number of different, like Lost was probably I think somebody said Twin Peaks was the beginning of that, where it not really ultimately, it doesn't have to make sense.
Yeah.
And so then after everybody bought Twin Peaks, then all this other crazy stuff got green-lighted, and Lost just had there was nothing going on in Lost. It was just an attempt to get you to watch from one episode to another with no idea where it was going, or what it amounted to, and it didn't amount to anything. And I felt like that about Dark. It was just so convoluted. It was crazy. And that's, I think, Walt, I was saying the same thing about Man in the High Castle. Mm-hmm. Like, I just felt like, okay, well, you've set up this premise where anything can happen.
Right.
And so I'm not interested at all because, whatever you want to happen. And that's what's going on with the superhero movies. Mm-hmm. It's like there's all these movies where they just like, they can die and they can come back and whatever,
There's no like rigor to the storytelling.
There's no rigor, yeah, and there's nothing driving it. I mean, there's really no artistic drive behind what they're producing. Well, they're just essentially trying to make money is all they're trying to do.
No, what's driving
and nobody is trying to work out.
What's driving it is how do we get to the 20-minute fighting and explosion scene that closes out every single one of those movies.
Right.
That's what's driving it.
Yeah, exactly.
Except those go all the way through it now. The explosions start right at the beginning.
Right.
And then somebody dies and they're completely gone. And then somebody else shows up and puts their hand on them and there's electrical things and they come back again.
Yeah.
How can you care?
That's why that movie last night was so good. The #Alive. I don't want to give anything away, but there were really high stakes. And I thought the ending, it was going to rip me apart. So it was really good.
That sounds great. What is the title?
It's called #Alive,
#Alive. I thought you said Korea Alive.
No, it's something. Korean.
It was like,
and I don't know if you saw that movie called Burning that was out a few years ago, a Korean movie. The lead from Burning is in it. Oh, that was a good movie. That was one of those.
Yeah, Korean.
Yeah, I love.
Yeah, Korean movies are hot, right? Aren't they?
Yeah, actually, they were hot. Probably. I mean, they are hot. The Asian stuff has been my favorite for like a long, long time now. But I know that the guy who did Parasite is whatever. I'm getting off the topic, so.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, well, you're not really. But there are a lot of horror movies that have come out of Korea, aren't there? A lot of
and Japan has some really good ones too. I mean, amazing. horror movies that just, at the end you're just cringing. Have you seen any of those?
I don't know. I
That's
think
the tone of voice you use, Grace, when you're talking about really good pies.
Yeah. I don't exactly know what that tone is.
I don't know. It's the opposite of peanut butter, chocolate, Reese's Pieces pie.
Yeah.
Reese's Pieces.
Yeah, it's unbridled joy, I guess.
I actually learned something here because I didn't. I thought, Grace, you were actually much more. I think of you as much more of an agnostic, or even on the believing side. And so I was surprised when you said you don't believe in any of that stuff.
Yeah, I was surprised too.
Well, I don't believe in any of that. Yeah, I don't believe in it either. But
Well, the whole who was it that said about I think it was about religion can't hurt, might help, or something like that, right? That's my view, I suppose. Well, no, it's not really even my view. I feel like, why should I waste my time with it if I don't know that it's true? So I just want I want evidence. I want the fact. And I love imagining things. I do love fantasy, but that's something that could really infringe on my lifestyle if I decide to take it seriously. I don't know. It's very mixed up for me. I don't.
Yeah, the whole idea that you've got to know something in order to participate or to take it seriously is so recent in history. I mean, I think it's only in the last few hundred years even that there was this. I mean, you could think of Voltaire and the Enlightenment and all of those figures in France like 250 years ago where they were all rejecting religion and rejecting, superstition, quote unquote, and all of this stuff. And everything had to be provable, or, there had to be evidence for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this kind of cynical, dismissive, kind of knowing and superior attitude toward the world. And we've all kind of accepted that. And and it's such a recent phenomenon. And I think this goes back to what I was saying before about superhero movies and all this, that we need this other realm because we have no other way of getting to our subconscious and to what it is that actually undergirds your experience. And we used to have that with mythology and religion and all of these practices.
But isn't fundamentalism just as scary?
Yeah, but that's knowing. See, that's the problem. Fundamentalists think they know everything.
Yeah, they know, absolutely.
They have certainty. Yeah, that certainty isn't what it's about. It was never about certainty. Faith isn't certainty.
It's not?
No, it's a choice. It's choosing to live a certain way in the hope and the faith that it's in accord with the way things are.
But I think that is recent, though. I think that's recent, Dave, because up until a certain point, you had to have a religion, right? You had to be a believer in something.
Right, but that's different, though. See, I mean, we think that believers are certain about things. I don't think believers in the past ever felt they were certain. I think there's a saying in Zen, or maybe even in Christianity, like the stronger the doubt, the stronger the faith. And they're hand in hand. The doubt and the faith go hand in hand.
Yeah, but if you took off in the Crusades, you were pretty certain what you were doing.
Right.
Well, but that's all right. But that's all. Then it's all been. The backdrop is the church. Like if you're in the Crusades, then you're just a soldier in service to the government of the time, which was the Catholic Church. That's a whole different proposition. And the same thing with Islam. I mean, when you go to these religious wars and stuff, that's a much different thing. Then you're just talking about power. But that's not what the faith was. I mean, the original faith, not what the wisdom tradition or if you go back to the actual books and the actual founders, that had nothing to do with that.
Don't you think most people say the Middle Ages, they were fundamentalist believers?
I don't know. I'm not sure that's true. I don't think so.
The
Middle Ages, like if you look at the medieval, the monks and the monasteries, they were preserving the classics. They were preserving the Greek.
But if they weren't fundamentalists, then why was it so dangerous to be a heretic?
Yeah, Dave.
Well, that's the Habsburgs. Come on. that was the Inquisition. I mean, you're talking about 400 or 500 years ago. I mean, I think that was the Inquisition was a response to Luther, wasn't it? I mean, it was the church. That's all about the church. That's all about this organization that has worldly power. It's not about
Belief. It's not about belief.
Yeah, it's not about, if you go back to the writings and the sayings of the founders, Jesus, Buddha, whatever, then it's a whole different thing.
But how many people were doing that? Most people were connected by faith to the church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like you were just brought up in a faith and you believed, and some people had doubts, but by and large, people believed because they didn't. And this goes back to what took the place of, between superheroes and what came earlier than that. Maybe science was that interim period, because science was really giving us so many things at that time. Maybe science was the superhero for like the 20s to the 50s or whatever. Right. Or maybe it was the military industrial complex. I don't know, but and they were all tied together, right?
If you were a peasant in 1410 and you said, my faith is a little shaky, they'd light you up.
Yeah.
There was a period where that was going on, but that wasn't the Middle Ages.
That actually happened, Dave.
Yeah, right.
I feel like that went on a lot, not in just a finite period.
Well,
yeah.
But here's the thing.
I mean, look at ISIS. Look at ISIS, right? It's all the same. It's going on right now.
Well, here's something I need to tell you guys, because you should know this about me, that I am really bad at history. And I don't think my knowledge about everything else is so spectacular. However, history is really my Achilles heel. So when you start talking about historical stuff, maybe if I read a book on it, I'll be good. But in general, I'm not going to have anything that's...
so if I ask you what year Socrates ran for president, you're not going to be able to tell me?
Exactly.
Okay.
I didn't even know he did. History was never, literary history I can go for, but I don't know why. History just never, like my son knows more about history in general than I do. It's bad. It's very bad. That's why I think I've read a lot more books, historical books over the past, 15, 20 years than I ever did before, because I feel like it's such a massive gap. Like I've been wanting someone to recommend to me what's the best series of books or one book about U.S. history that I should read. Because I feel like such a dunce sometimes.
I just read a book about the history of the airmail service.
Really? It was good?
I did. It was fascinating. It would be
I bet.
It would be a fascinating movie.
Yeah.
Except no one would care. Because all they care about is, fantasy shit.
Yeah.
There's such great stories that came out of the development of that.
I bet.
You could make a movie out of it, Walt, but it would have to. Walt sent me an email that just said that the greatest fear was that you would, not that you would crash and burn, but that you would crash and survive, because there was no way that you could actually get back to civilization. You just die. You just starve, basically.
Oh, really?
When you were flying the airmail, there was 4 hours between stops, and once you left one place, nobody knew where you were until you showed up.
Really?
Yeah, because there was no radio, there was no...
So what year? What years was this? Right after
World War I, and of course, what years World War I was.
I do know that, at least, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can tell you that.
Early 20s.
Okay.
And little airplanes, and they would just disappear, and that's what they were afraid of, because search and rescue wasn't a thing, survival gear wasn't a thing. If you went down, you were just going to starve to death or freeze to death.
Isn't that
so
interesting?
You could make a movie, but there would be a crash fairly early, and then it wouldn't really be about the airmail service. Right. It would be like the Revenant,
Or Alive. Yeah, Alive.
Right. Yeah, Alive, yeah.
Or a guy trapped under a plane, and he'd have to cut his leg off.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And then hop. Then he hops back to civilization.
Hop across Wyoming.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, what would be a movie... What did you just say? I missed that.
Hop across Wyoming.
Yeah. What would be a movie that was made that actually was popular, that was about a really obscure topic like that? It's got to exist. I just don't know off the top of my head what it is.
Oh, about something like the airmail service.
Yeah.
Something that you would want to find out about?
Well, no, but I like to think that you say you could never make a movie about that, no one would watch it, but I like to think that there have been movies like that made and people did watch it, but I just can't think of which one it would be right now.
Right. Well, what I was thinking, there was this place in Pennsylvania that was one of the first airmail stops where the town just went nuts for these guys. People would come from farms all around just to see an airplane, and these guys were heroes. And there's a whole thing that could be done with that one little town. It's a fascinating thing. And I could tell by the way you said, that you probably wouldn't go see it.
Yeah, that's interesting, Walt.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
but it could be a phenomenal movie. I totally agree.
If he crashed his airplane there and then there was like electrical things that happened and he came out and he was some kind of super
There you go.
hero that could fly without an airplane.
There you go.
Now we got something. Green light that son of a bitch.
And if he could time travel once he hit the jet stream, in the airplane.
Right. Fly backwards around the planet so time goes backwards.
Time goes backwards, yeah.
I heard Tenet has some of that. I haven't seen it,
It does
but
have some of that. Yeah, I heard that too.
No one understood anything that happened.
Are any of his movies comprehensible? I mean,
Dunkirk.
Dunkirk, sort of. I mean, but he made it as difficult to understand as possible.
Well, that's true. That's true.
I just rewatched Memento, and it was harder to understand than I remembered.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Everybody kept talking about the mole in Dunkirk, and I kept looking for a spy. I'm thinking like, well, who's the spy? The mole. They keep referring to the mole. It was that big wharf. You remember? It was the dock. That was called a mole.
Right.
And so they're all referring to the mole, and I'm sitting there watching like, well, who's the mole? I don't get it. Yeah, like there's a German mole here. Wait, with all these people trying to get back to England, I don't get it.
That can ruin a whole movie, a misapprehension like that.
Yeah.
I was watching, I don't know if you remember this. I think it was called The Lion in the Darkness. It was
a good movie.
Yeah. It was a really good movie. For some reason, I thought it was like an hour longer than it was, and it totally affected my experience of the movie because I didn't realize it was really approaching the end and this was the climax of everything, and I'm still thinking, wow, they got another hour to go. And it really was weird how it changed the whole experience for me. It just totally discombobulated me completely.
That's it for this episode. What's up next? No clue. Best way to find out? Subscribe. And if you'd like to get in touch with Grace, Dave, and Wally, it's easy. Tweet them at charbroilc or send an email to charbroiledchats@gmail.com. No, I'm not spelling those out. Look them up. Tweet, email, subscribe. You have nothing to lose, except a little self-respect.
Christopher Nolan insisting on calling it a mole, and everybody's saying,
It's like no one knows what that is, Chris.
let's call it a dock. No. And then it turns out to be, it was an actual mole.
Right.
Like a whack-a-mole thing.
Well, that's what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say, well, there really was a mole in the trenches.